What should I say? I need something quirky to say for the intro. Hi. I don't know if I've mentioned this, but I've been in a reading slump. And, it's because I've been feeling a little bit down recently. And if you're a bookworm like myself, you know that sometimes books can be more comforting than people, especially books that are familiar. And that is why today we're going to be talking about my favourite book of all time, which is My Mad Fat Teenage Diary by Earl. Not technically a fiction book, it's her real life diary from when she was like 17, 18. Essentially, she was suffering with a lot of mental health issues at the time. And since she was growing up in the 80s, there was a lot less visibility about these things and there was a lot less help that she could get. And so she ended up hiding a lot of it because she didn't want to end up back in like the loony bin, as she calls it, because she did spend a little bit of time in a mental health ward with a load of adults. And that didn't really help her because it was just a lot of isolation. So that's the reason I've gone for the blue eyeshadow today, because it's 80s. And I've got my Iron Maiden t-shirt on. I was going to crimp my hair as well, but my niece stole my crimpers for a party, so I'm quite gutted about that. I actually didn't buy this book. My nan used to pick up books in charity shops for me on the way home. She used to just pick up a pile of books that were for like £1 or 50p, and then I just used to read them all at an alarming rate. And this was one of them, and it just so happened to turn out to be my favourite book of all time. I always loved diary format fiction when I was younger. I really liked feeling like I was inside the character's head, and obviously as someone who kept a diary as well, it was more relatable to me. And this one was even more perfect because it was the real life diary of a real life teenager back in the day. I've always really identified with Ray when I was a teenager, and even now I see myself in her so much. The best part about that for me is that Ray is a real living, breathing person. So obviously when I'm feeling down, as I have been recently, to turn to this book is nice because it's a nice reminder that other people have felt the way that you do and that you are not alone. I would really recommend anybody to read this because it is gorgeous and funny, and the whole seeing Ray's innermost thoughts with her mental health and stuff like that, it really does just have such a poignancy that you wouldn't be able to write. It's authentic. That's the only word to describe it. One of the highlights of the book for me is Ray's relationship with her mum. I really see a lot of my relationship with my mum in there. Ray's mum is also like mental. I'm going to be saying mental a lot in this. I don't want anybody to be offended by that. It's the way that Ray refers to herself. And I don't know, not to get into a big political debate about it, but I don't see the problem with describing yourself as mental sometimes. Mental to be inside one's head? No? Anyway, her and her mum are both mental and living in this house together on their own. Obviously, in every mother-daughter relationship there's going to be arguments and stuff, but with the pair of them being the way they are, with Ray being so insular and like more like the depressive side of things, and her mum kind of having these fits of being really out there, marrying a Moroccan bodybuilder or getting a tattoo of said Moroccan bodybuilder on her arse. These are the things that Ray has to live with as a 17-year-old girl. So, it's a really funny, really poignant book, and I would really recommend it to anybody. And from now, I'm going to be getting into kind of spoiler territory for it. So if you feel like it's going to be your kind of thing, you can, go now if you want. The book does have a sequel, and that is obviously My Madder Fatter Diary, and that came out like a few years after. I didn't used to like the sequel because a lot of my interest in the first book, obviously when I was a teenager, like it was a lot of my interest was in the relationship that she kind of has with a guy who she refers to as Haddock. And in this book, he isn't really present, even though she does think about him a lot and she is still basically in love with him. This focuses a lot more on Ray goes out to Poland, I believe it is. She goes to a different country, and she really gets to grips with her mental health because previously she felt like she couldn't even leave the house. So this is a really big thing for her because she missed out on university and stuff like that, and it really focuses in more on the mental health side of things. And as I've grown older, I've really come to appreciate that because I feel like on some level, because Ray talks about the feedback that she got from her first book, and like obviously there are loads of people writing in saying they identify with her, but some of these people are the people who she grew up with, who she compared herself to, who she thought was so together, and they've obviously admitted that they were going through exactly the same thing. And I feel like maybe she released this book and focused in more on the mental health and the getting better side of her mental health, because she realized that that's what we needed to see. That's what those people needed to see. And the people who identified with her in the first book needed to see that she not got better, because of course we all know that there is no getting better, but that she got the help that she needed and now she can better cope. And another place where she showed us this is in another book that she wrote that I do have, but I forgot to bring it down with me, and it's called It's All in Your Head. That's a mental health book. It was kind of aimed at young adults. It talks about some common mental health problems, and it goes into OCD as well, because that's what Ray specifically has. But she does deal with a lot of other stuff in there, and there are a lot of really good tips on just general mental health stuff. And I feel like a lot of times when you read these self-help books, when it comes to mental health, you are a little bit cynical. But the thing about Ray is that she's been through it, and if you don't believe her, you can read the diaries that she wrote literally at the time when she was struggling and see that she has been through it. And that makes it so much more authentic, and it really makes you take in the advice that she's giving you. And it is good advice. It is good advice. And sometimes when I'm feeling down, I know that I do get the book out and turn to a certain page and just read it again and just take it in again and really try to apply it to my situation. Because as much as we can read these books, I know that I just immediately, like, as soon as I put it down and start reading something else, even though I've retained that knowledge, it's not something that I really apply into my life. I just kind of spout platitudes about it. I don't know. Let's bring it back. Let's talk about the book. It's hard, to review a book that is based on real life. Well, it's not based on real life, it is real life. It's a real life account. It's hard to review that because obviously it doesn't follow like the normal story structure. Like there isn't really like a beginning, middle, and an end. It's just the events that happen between this date and this date in her life, and you get what you're given. There's not really anything I can say about like the composition of the story or like the way that it's written, even though the way that it's written is hilarious, but it's just her thoughts. She didn't really think that anybody was ever going to be reading it. It isn't written for an audience. So the fact that it's brilliant is just even more astounding, really. I will say before I get into the rest of the review that I do just genuinely love this book. It's become to a point where the book is as much a part of me as anything else, you know what I mean, as my taste in music, anything. And you can barely turn to a page where it's not dog-eared or underlined, because there's some mad, funny, relatable quote in there that I just couldn't let go. Here's one that's quite hilarious, actually. In my formative years, when I first read the book, I've highlighted, I have to fancy a film star because no one fancies me. But in more recent years, I have written in the margin, fuck that negativity, and underlined the previous phrase, which is from a previous diary of Ray's that she has since burned, that reads, I'm too busy with a commitment to Tom Cruise to bother with a boyfriend. Me. So, yeah, it's not all stuff like that. Some of it is genuinely stuff that like makes me cry with the relatability of it, and just sometimes just thinking that Ray is like out there right now living her life as like an older woman now, it just makes me feel a little bit better. She got through it, I can get through it. It's that simple. So I want to talk a little bit about the TV show that got made about this two set of books. As you can see, it says as seen on E4 over here. Don't know whether any of you have ever watched it, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the adaptation, because that'll give me a little bit of scope to talk about what they did with the concepts in the book, and then you can get kind of a better idea of what the book is about. That's the way that my brain's gone about it anyway. So anyway, in the TV series, the first series does kind of follow the structure of the first book to a certain degree. There are a few changes, and I'm going to talk about that by going through character by character. The characters in the book are based on real people, but the names have been changed by Ray, and in some cases she was already writing code names because her mum would snoop in her diary. So a lot of them are referred to by like chip shop names, like haddock, battered sausage, and stuff like that. It's a little bit weird, but we're gonna roll with it. They thought it was funny. We'll start with the girl in the show. It's called Chloe, and she is obviously based on the girl in the book, Bethany. The fun thing about Bethany in the book is that she's actually an amalgamation of three girls from the original diary. It's all smushed together. The quote that Ray uses to explain this is, "There's never just one bitchy girl in a fat mad girl's life." Bethany in the book is kind of that friend that Ray has known throughout her life, and they used to gel quite well. But since they've grown up, Bethany is kind of, she's more stereotypically girly and Ray isn't, and that wouldn't normally get in the way, but Bethany puts Ray down a lot for this. And it's kind of that friendship that we all had that becomes toxic, like kind of through no fault of their own because they're just at different levels. But like Bethany is like kind of a bitch about it in the book, and like I know she's young and stuff, but she's a bitch. In the show, they didn't make Chloe an all out bitch because they wanted, I think, the opportunity to explore complicated female relationships. So at the beginning, we do kind of see her as a little bit of a bitch, but we see the relationship develop over time and she becomes more sympathetic as the show goes on. The dynamic changes over the course of the two series that we had, and we get to see what happens as they grow up, but they still grow together, and I think that's nice. And I think that if they'd have just made it how it was in the book, where Bethany eventually leaves and then when she comes back she's even bitchier than normal and she's just like, "Oh Ray, we should meet up for a coffee," and then she just talks about herself for the whole time and is like, "Let's not see each other again, I don't want to restart this toxic relationship." And it's like, okay, so you just came here to brag essentially, Beth. let's be real. Sometimes I forget that these characters are based on like real people, and then I'm like, oh my god, like what if one of the real people like somehow sees this and they're like the person who is Bethany is like, oh my god, she called me a bitch. But to be fair, Bethany in the book is probably bitchier than like the real life Bethany, because real life Bethany was three different girls. So that's three bitches combined. So the three of them individually probably weren't that bad. In my defense, Your Honor. I really enjoy the relationship between Ray and Chloe in the show, and I like the way that, I think it's in the second series, we see that Chloe also keeps a diary and we get to spend an episode reading through that, and we really see how like the two of them remember things a little bit differently because they've got these preconceived notions about each other in their heads, and sometimes we just need to be a bit kinder to our friends and maybe see them clearly. It's weird, it's like, have you ever noticed like when you have known a person for a while, you don't really look at them. Like, I know sometimes I'll be sitting with my friends and I'll really look at them and I'll be like, oh, my mates are so gorgeous. And it's like, just because you're used to seeing their face, you don't really look at them anymore. You know what I mean? So it's like, in the same way, maybe we mentally gloss over some of the stuff that they're actually saying to us. We're not really listening to it because we're just hearing what we think we're going to say. And, I liked that little bit of poignancy there. That was quite sweet. Her next character in the show, her name is Izzy. In the book, I believe she is based on the character Dobber, who is like she's like a little bit of a side character, but Ray really gets along with her. She doesn't really talk about her much, but they are often together, always having a laugh and stuff. In the TV show, they had Izzy have a will they won't they relationship with one of the boys in the group, whereas in the book, her counterpart was in a long-term relationship with a guy called Fig. Well, he wasn't actually called Fig, but that was his nickname. I think that they made the will they won't they relationship a thing because it would obviously add more like B plots to the series and make it more interesting and add drama, etc., etc. But I would have liked the long-term relationship representation. However, I can see why they made that decision artistically or whatever. The next character is in the show Chop, who is based on the character Battered Sausage in the book. Battered Sausage is, I would say, he's Ray's best friend in the book. They have a complicated relationship, and sometimes she's not sure whether she's in love with him. And, obviously that's because she's a teenager and she's having all these rushing hormones. But they do have this, like, close, stupid relationship with each other, and it's really funny to read about. And I don't think that really gets portrayed that well on screen. Their relationship kind of fell by the wayside when it came to Ray's relationship with Finn, which I can understand how they did that, but I don't really feel the same bond between Ray and Chop as Ray and Battered Sausage. Although I do appreciate it that they kept a food-themed nickname for him in the TV show. I thought that was funny. It's just like, yeah, he suits having a stupid nickname. They couldn't just call him like Simon or something. That would be weird. He is, though, the best adapted character. I feel like Batter Sausage is very much just a lad's lad, and he's just very silly and very out there. But he is very loyal, and we do see this loyalty that he had to Ray in the book with other characters such as like Finn and Archie. And I'm not saying that Chop and Ray aren't close. It's just that with the whole group dynamic that's going on, other character relationships got explored more. And it's not that it lost anything, it's just that it's a little bit less authentic to the book in that way. So I thought it was worth a mention. The character of Archie in the TV show is based on vaguely the character Harry in the book. In the book, Ray's very first relationship is with a boy called Harry, and I think it lasts all of like 3 days. And then he kind of admits that he went out with her out of like pity almost, and Ray was gutted about it. And nothing really came of it, and she didn't really see him again after that, or if she did, she didn't think to mention it. I appreciated the fact that in the show they used this first relationship encounter to utilize what was essentially a non-character in the book and explore sexuality in this retro setting. We're already exploring mental health in like the past. Now we got to explore like Archie is like gay, and the reason he goes out with Ray is because they do really get along, and he's just in denial about his sexuality. And that's something that they explore all through the series, and like I do appreciate that they took what could have just been a little nothingy one episode, Ray's first relationship, and made it into something more and something meaningful. They did also add some characters in like Tix, Danny, and Kester, the therapist. They introduced therapy in the show to talk about mental health more openly and explore issues that weren't specific to Ray in the other characters. Because like Tix also had an eating disorder, but it was in that she wouldn't eat, where Ray overeats. And then there was Danny Two Hats, who it's never explicitly stated what his whole thing is. He's a really prominent character in the show, and he's one of the best ones in my opinion. So I appreciated this addition because obviously as much as Ray doesn't talk about therapy, she did go to therapy, so it was a good opportunity to just, really hammer home some of the messages that they had going by having a whole therapy speech about it. And finally, we get to the character that I want to talk about the most, and it's in the show Finn and in the book Haddock. Listen, this relationship between Haddock and Ray in the book is possibly one of the most romantic relationships in any book ever, and it happened in real life, and I just love that. Ray is in love with Haddock. She doesn't like him at first, and then she finds out that they're very similar and that Haddock has his own mental health struggles, and then they bond over that, and Ray really falls head over heels for him. She's in love with him over the course of the entire 2 books and never says anything, but at the end there is a little note from Ray, and she admits that something nearly happened with Haddock once, and she was too scared to do anything. And then also, after she'd married her husband, she ran into him again, and he said, "Please come and have a drink with me." And she was like, "I've not got enough time, dude, like I can't." And he looked really sad, and then they just parted ways. Oh, and he also told her husband that he was really, really lucky. And I was like, oh my god. If you believe in soulmates, like, those two are it for me. And it's just even worse that they never ended up together. Like, it's this whole Romeo and Juliet situation that I just can't handle, and I'm gonna cry. I'm way too emotional over these sorts of things. Like, the most romantic thing in the world is when something should happen and it doesn't. And that's shit. That is heartbreaking at the same time. Like, what? Am I broken? I think that even Finn in the TV show is like the ultimate romantic interest in any media. He's so great. I've talked about him in a video before, fictional characters that I would marry without hesitation, and it's true. In the show, it does the same thing where Ray doesn't like him at first, but she's got the wrong idea of him, and then he defends her from some bullies, and then she kind of starts seeing that there's a different side to him, and they bond and they end up being the closest. And that's kind of why the relationship with Battered Sausage or Chop fell to the wayside, because they really went in depth into exploring this relationship between Finn and Ray. But the thing that happened in the show, obviously, that didn't happen in the book, is that Finn and Ray actually end up together at the end of the series. And you know, I appreciated that because obviously in a TV show, people are gonna want them to get together, and if they don't, then fuck you, isn't it? So like, it doesn't have to be true to real life because the fact of the matter is they were going to do a series too, and they needed shit to talk about, so they wanted to explore mental health in relationships and how your mental health can affect your relationships. I also understand why in season two Ray went to college instead of to Poland because that's a lot more relatable for the like kids who are watching the show, and like they obviously need that boost that they can also go to college like Ray did and make a go of it. You know what I mean? At the end of series two, Finn and Ray break up. No, it's not actually at the end of series two. They're like on and off all the way through series two. It's really weird. And like Ray has this relationship with this other dude who's a really great character, by the way. The character might not be great, but he's a great written character, if you get me, and I appreciate him for that. But like, anyway, the conclusion of the series is that they decide to stay broken up because Ray eventually decided that she was ready for the relationship. And when she went around, like, Finn was with this other girl. And not to be all Ross about it. And I know that I'm always Ross in these situations, but god damn it, they were on a break. They were on a goddamn break. Anyway, even though the show tried to kind of ruin Finn so that we would be less invested in them getting back together by him doing that, I don't kind of think he did anything wrong because Ray had been pushing him away and saying this relationship wasn't going to happen. And sorry, I've just literally like applied this to my real life and my mind is being blown right now. Oh my god, I love reading. This is cheap therapy. $6.99 for a paperback, you know? Therapy session. Just pick the right book. So Ray has been pushing him away. He didn't even like move on. It wasn't like he was in a new relationship. It's just like he was maybe kissing a girl, maybe gonna have sex with a girl. But it was like they weren't together, and I don't know, like I don't know. I forgive him. What do you think? So in conclusion, I do love the TV show. I do rewatch it all the time. It's really great, and I think that it did what it could with the little of the subject matter that it had. Because to be fair, these books aren't very long, and there isn't a lot of like detailed content in them. Like some bits of detail that Ray felt like telling us about, but other bits are just skimmed over. So for them to fill in the blanks in the way that they did, I think is great. But as far as the book goes, it's still to this day just one of the best books of all time. And I can even just skim through it and read the bits that I've underlined and just feel that little bit better about myself. And I think that anyone should read it, but especially anyone who like struggles with their mental health, and especially girls, or if you have self-image issues or issues with your weight. I think that this is something that you could really do with reading if you are, you know, comfortable with that. So, you know, I would really, really recommend it. And I've really enjoyed talking about it today because I've never met anyone else who has read this. And, you know, it's very tempting sometimes to try and find out where Rhea lives and send her a letter like, listen, I am your biggest fan. I don't know. She wrote some other books, but I was too old when they came out to really appreciate them. They were for younger readers, but like if you're watching this and you're a little bit younger, you should check those out. They're also in a diary format, but they're obviously fictional. She's made them up, but I can imagine that they are really funny because if she's this funny without trying, like imagine what she can do when she is. You know, some people are just born comedians like that. I think I'm done with this today as much as I don't want to be. I haven't done a video for ages, and like I was really dreading it, and now I'm like, I feel purged. I really wanted to talk about this book because it made me feel better. And if even like one person watches this or sees the thumbnail or like watches the first 5 seconds and just thinks, oh, I'll give that a try, like that, and it helps them, then go ahead. And you know, read It's All in Your Head by her as well, if that's something you feel like you need to do, because that's a more positive look at it. I know that sometimes reading the actual subject matter that she wrote at the time might be a little bit dark if you're going through some shit, but the It's All in Your Head has this really positive vibe to it, and she's still really funny in that as well, and she's got some really good tips and tricks, so it could really help you out. That's all I'm saying. That's all I want to do, man. I just want to help you out, you know? I'm here for the funnies, I'm here for the laughs, and I'm here for the therapy sesh, and that has been it for today, so I'm gonna go. See you later.